Okay, today we're looking at 13.8, which is more about genetics. And last lesson we looked at 13.7, which showed you how to lay your work out in terms of the phenotypes, the genotypes, the possible gametes, and then we used what was called a genetic cross or a Punnett square to work out what the likely offspring would be. So specific genotypes mating or crossing with other specific genotypes will always give a typical ratio. And AQA are very likely to ask you questions giving you rough numbers around those ratios and will expect you to work backwards to work out the genotype of the parent. Let's have a look at a homozygous recessive crossed with a homozygous dominant and just have a look at the ratio. So if we just go straight into it, because the previous lesson looked at how to set it out, but let's just use the example of Big B. We've got a homozygous dominant and we're going to match that, we're going to cross that with a homozygous recessive. Straight away we can work out that all the offspring are in fact going to have the phenotype of the dominant allele, because all of them, when we match them up, have both the dominant and the recessive allele. So the recessive is not expressed, but the dominant is. So all of these now are considered to be heterozygous. If we now call this the F1 generation, and we're going to cross that F1 generation and look at the likely phenotypic offspring that would be produced. Okay, so I've got my F1 generation. We said they were all heterozygous, and I've shown that they're in gamete by putting a circle around them. Don't forget to do that in your exam, because even my A-level, I'm doing this topic with my A-level group, and this morning some students who are hoping to achieve an A-star forgot to put it in circles. How silly to give those marks away. Let's have a look then, if we've got heterozygous versus a heterozygous, what we're going to get. Here, we're clearly going to get a homozygous, and it's going to be a homozygous dominant. Heterozygous, heterozygous, homozygous, recessive. So if we look now at the phenotype of those, let's imagine we're looking at brown eyes and blue eyes. We're going to have brown eyes, brown eyes, brown eyes, and blue eyes. We're going to have a ratio of 3 to 1. And it's important in an exam question that if you ask for the percentage likelihood, you give the percentage, or if they ask for the ratio, that you actually give the ratio. Let's now have a look at how you do ratios, because they always have to be to 1. So if you were dealing with bigger numbers, let's have a look at how you would present. Let's go straight into an example that AQA could give you in an exam question. So imagine that the offspring of 2 cross plants give you 102 red petaled plants and 31 white petaled. Well, we are clicking on straight away that there's roughly a ratio of 3 to 1 there, and we would write that 3 to 1. And when we get offspring that exhibits this 3 to 1 ratio, then we know that we were looking at a heterozygous versus a heterozygous. So if we were going to work backwards, we would say, clearly this is going to be our dominant allele. So we're going to say R is equal to red, and the lowercase r is our white allele. And if we worked it out, just to double check, heterozygous versus a heterozygous, let's have a little look. Yes, we are going to get our 3 to 1 ratio. So if I wanted to get this into an exact ratio, let's just have a little think about how you do that. Okay, so we're looking at this question. It's probably a little bit more than you would get at GCSE, but we don't really know that because it's the new specification and we're hoping for those higher grades, 8 and 9. And it says, what is the ratio of white to red petaled plants? So the first thing when we're working out a ratio is that we get it the right way round. We don't want to go red to white because it's asked for white to red. And the number that we've got is 33 to 102. Now we know that that is roughly 3 to 1, or in this case, 1 to 3. But in biology, with ratios, we have to give them to the lowest number, which is 1. So to get this, so that one of those numbers equals 1, what we need to do is take this one and divide it by 33, and that's going to give 1. And then we're going to get 102 and divide it by 33, which gives us 3.09. We always give it to 3 significant figures unless we're told otherwise. We always give it to 3 significant figures unless, for instance, it was a table of results and it was all to 2 significant figures, or if the precision of our measuring instruments didn't go to that. But generally, it goes to 3 significant figures. That was probably a little bit harder than what you would be asked in an exam, because we had to have white first and then red, and you were probably expecting the 3-to-1 ratio. And indeed, that is what this question is wanting you to click onto, that it is roughly a 3-to-1 ratio. And it will be roughly a 3-to-1 ratio because remember, it's not an exact science. It is the chances of these combinations happening. Just like in any family, if you've got 4 children, you don't always get 2 boys and 2 girls. It is the chance. And so what we're clicking onto here, it's a 3-to-1 ratio, and we know a 3-to-1 ratio is created by a heterozygous being crossed with a heterozygous. So in this case, if red was represented by big R and the white was represented by a lowercase r, and we were asked for the genotypes of the parents, then we would say that both parents had the genotype big R, little r. We're looking now at what we call the sex chromosomes. They are called the sex chromosomes because they are what denote your gender, whether you're male or female. They are the 23rd pair. Remember, you've got 46 chromosomes, and they are homologous chromosomes because when we lay them out, then they match in size. Of course they would match in size because they've got to have the right number of positions, the right number of loci for the alleles to sit on. So because you get 1 allele from mum and you get 1 allele from dad. So we've got 46 pairs of chromosomes, 46 chromosomes, we lay them out in 23 pairs, and the last pair are the smallest pair, and they are not homologous. They are not exactly the same, because one is shaped like an X and one is shaped like a Y. So the way it goes is this. If a person inherits 2 X chromosomes, then you have all the information to make you female. If you have the chromosomes X and a Y chromosome, then you are a male. So let's just think about that in a bit more detail. Here we've got a normal cross, and we've got mum, we've got dad, male and female. And the male, all the things that make males male are the X and the Y chromosome, and all the things that make female female are the 2 X's together. So let's have a little look. There's the phenotype, male characteristics and female characteristics. Genotype, XY, XX. So what gametes can they actually produce? Well, dad can give 2 types of gametes. When his cells turn into sperm cells, he's either going to give an X or he's going to give a Y. Mum can only ever give an X because that's all she's got. So it's actually dad that dictates the gender of the child. And it's a 50-50 split whether it's going to be a girl or whether it's going to be a boy, because he's only got 1 of each to give, and he gives an equal amount of both. Let's have a look on a Punnett square. If we just draw it in and we say this is mum's gamete, we only need to draw 1 of them because she can only give 1 type. Dad can give an X or dad can give a Y. Now when you're drawing these X's and Y's, it's almost advisable to do it like an X, like you get in maths, because otherwise your X and your Y can look very similar. Some students get a bit sloppy and they do their Y's, it looks a little bit like an X. So be careful of that. So here, mum's given an X, dad's given either an X or a Y. If he gives an X, you're going to have a little baby girl. if he gives a Y, you're going to have a boy. This is when it gets really interesting. It's a really interesting field of biology, and lots of students ask questions about the different combinations that you can have, and you can have lots of different combinations. One of them is called Klinefelter syndrome, and what actually happens is, remember that a female is born with all her eggs there, and so the older she gets, the more chances of things going wrong when she is an old mum, if you like. And old mum is considered to be anything over 35, which is insane really. I think it might even be 30. But anyway, just before she makes her eggs, they divide into, the two chromosomes divide into two gametes. And sometimes what can happen is that division doesn't actually happen properly. And the egg, the gamete, will look like that. It will be fertilised by the male sperm cell. And so genetically the male, remember that combination then, XXY, that is then put into every single cell, because that's the fertilised egg. It turns from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 and so on. So every cell in that person's body has that genetic makeup, and instead of having 46 chromosomes, he'll have 47. But is he male or is he female? Well, he's male, but he may have some female characteristics. So less body hair, less musculature, smaller testicles. So I've just had a student ask me to explain this one again. And what we've said was that the male, when he makes his sperm, he either makes sperm with an X or with a Y chromosome in there. The female egg is always an X. So if this one gets there first, then the fertilised egg, the zygote, is going to be XX. But if this one gets there first and fertilises it, then it's going to be XY. Remember we said take care of that little Y bit there. So this would be your female and this would be your male. Now they say that it's equal chance for the X to reach there as it is there. It's 50-50. But in essence, some people, or there's a school of thought, or some scientists think that this one can swim quicker because it's got a little bit less genetic material, and therefore it's able to swim quicker and has an advantage and is more likely to fertilise the egg. Now, don't write that in your exam because you'll get it wrong. The idea is it's 50-50, but there are more boys born than females, and one of the suggestions to explain that is this. Later on in life, it evens out, and there's the same number of males and females roughly in the population, and they explain that away by saying that males engage in more dangerous, risk-taking behaviour, so that you're more likely to die as a child if you're male from misadventure. And also, if you think about the driving accidents, the biggest group of people who have accidents on the road are 17 to 24-year-old males, because they drive in a risky behaviour, and that's why their insurance costs a fortune.